I was 16 when it happened. Not that the number matters much now, but it was the kind of age where you think you know everything, until something reminds you just how fragile you really are. Back then, I lived with my dad in a sleepy little town tucked between forest preserves and long stretches of nothing. Our house sat on the edge of a dead-end street, the last one before the woods started. People always joked that it looked like a cabin more than a house, and maybe they weren't wrong. Creaky floors, drafty windows, and way too many shadows after sunset. My dad worked night shifts at the local plant, so most evenings, it was just me and the house, and silence. I never minded it. I actually kind of liked being alone. I wasn't the type who needed noise or constant people around. I guess you could say I liked my routines. Homework, a little reading, then bed by 11. But there's one thing that's always been off with me. I've got this sensitivity to sound. Not like I hear voices or anything weird like that, more like, when it gets too quiet, my brain fills the silence with its own stuff. I start hearing things that aren't there. Clicks, breathing, the hum of something that isn't supposed to be on. It never bothered me during the day. But at night, it was like the silence had teeth. That week in October, it had started to get cold. I remember because our old furnace had this awful moan every time it kicked on, like someone whispering through the vents. I'd gotten used to it, mostly. But that Thursday night, something felt off. I don't know how else to explain it. Just a feeling. Not fear exactly, more like the quiet had gotten too quiet. Like it was waiting. That Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Not even close. I lay in bed for maybe an hour, staring at the ceiling while the shadows shifted across the wood-paneled walls. The furnace had kicked on like usual, long, slow moan through the floorboards, but even that didn't break the strange tension I felt. It wasn't just restlessness. It was like something in the house was watching me. I tried reading. Didn't help. Tried counting backward from 100. Worse. My mind just kept looping around the same uneasy feeling, like I was being waited on. Sometime after 1 a.m., I gave up. I swung my legs out of bed and sat there for a moment, barefoot on the cold hardwood, listening. Not a sound. No wind outside. No distant highway hum. Not even the rustle of raccoons out back in the woods. Just silence. I stood up, walked quietly to my window, and looked outside. The moon was high, bleeding pale light across our backyard and into the edge of the forest. Everything looked still. Too still. But the cold air on the glass somehow grounded me. Maybe what I needed was a short walk. I'd done it before, just pacing the end of our road, breathing in the air, letting my nerves settle. I threw on my hoodie and some old sneakers, slipped down the stairs so quietly you'd think I was trying to avoid waking ghosts. My dad was gone, working the overnight shift like always, so there was no one to stop me. I didn't bring my phone. I don't know why. Maybe part of me didn't want the glow of the screen in my face, or maybe I just needed to feel disconnected. Either way, I stepped outside into the night without it. The air was sharper than I expected. Crisp, biting against my cheeks. I pulled my hood up and started walking down the road toward the cul-de-sac. That familiar crunch of gravel underfoot should have been comforting. But it wasn't. The deeper I walked into the stillness, the more it felt like I was entering something else entirely. Something that had been waiting quietly at the edge of the woods. Something that had just noticed me. The walk started out normal enough. The moonlight shimmered off the damp leaves, and the trees lining the end of the road looked like they'd been painted in silver. At first, the quiet was almost calming, like the world was holding its breath. I walked past the last house on our street and onto the dirt path that curved gently toward the edge of the woods. That path was my usual route when I couldn't sleep. It ran alongside the tree line before circling back to the neighborhood. I knew it by heart. Every route. Every bend. But that night, it felt different. like the forest was listening. I kept my pace slow, hands in my hoodie pocket, trying not to let my mind run wild. The sound of my footsteps was the only thing anchoring me. Each one landed soft on the dirt, steady, until something caught my eye. At the far end of the path, maybe 50 feet ahead, something was lying just off the trail. It looked like a pile of clothing at first, dark, rumpled, slumped halfway in the brush. I squinted, stopping in my tracks. No. Not clothing. It was a person. They were slouched against the base of a tree, knees bent at strange angles, their head tilted unnaturally to the side, like their neck couldn't hold it up. I couldn't see the face, just the shape. Black hoodie. Jeans. Barefoot. No movement. I froze. A dozen thoughts flashed through my head. Drunk? Homeless? Injured? Dead? This wasn't a part of town where people just collapsed and went unnoticed. We didn't have homeless people. Everyone knew everyone else. There was no logical reason for someone to be sitting out here like that, not at this hour. Not in this cold. I took a cautious step forward. My heart was pounding. Every instinct told me to turn around. Just go back. Pretend I hadn't seen anything. But something about the way they were slumped, lifeless and silent, dug into my conscience. What if they needed help? I took another step, then another. Leaves crunched. A branch creaked overhead. Still, the figure didn't move. Then, just as I got within maybe 20 feet, something else broke the silence. A sound I'll never forget. It came from behind me. A sharp, stuttering click, like a light switch flicked on and off rapidly, followed by the soft sound of something shifting in the trees. I spun around. Nothing. Just woods. Just shadows. But when I turned back to look at the figure by the tree, they were gone. I just stared. The figure that had been there, slumped, motionless, undeniably real, was gone. Not like they had gotten up and walked off. More like they'd vanished. No rustling. No footsteps. Just gone. My breath hitched. I felt it catch in my chest like a fishhook. I scanned the trees, my eyes darting between trunks, shadows, anything that might look wrong. But the woods were quiet again. Too quiet. And then I heard it, that sound again. Click. Click, click. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural either. It was intentional, like someone trying to get my attention. A deliberate staccato rhythm, sharp and too close. I turned slowly toward the noise. Every hair on my arm stood up. And then, from deep in the trees, I heard something else. A voice. Not quite human, not quite animal. It dragged through the air like it didn't belong in this world. A long, wheezing groan that twisted into a half sob, half laugh. It wasn't coming from one place, it echoed. Like it was bouncing between the branches, crawling through the dark. I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to turn around and bolt back home. But I didn't. I stood there, completely frozen, heart hammering like a war drum. My legs felt like they were no longer mine. Then the leaves near the path shifted, just slightly, and I caught a glimpse of something. A face. Not the full thing. Just the edge, cheekbone to jawline, peeking from behind a tree maybe 10 feet away. It was pale. Wax-like. Almost featureless. The skin looked stretched, wrong, like it didn't quite fit. I didn't think. Didn't blink. I just stumbled back, my foot catching on a root, and fell hard onto the dirt path. The impact knocked the air out of me, but I scrambled up fast, my palms stinging, knees burning. I didn't even look back. I just ran. I sprinted toward the neighborhood, crashing through the underbrush beside the trail, taking the shortest route I could remember. Twigs whipped my face. My hood flew back. My breath came in ragged gasps that felt like glass in my throat. But I swear, as I ran, I could still hear that clicking. Right behind me. Like it was chasing me. Mocking me. Click. Click. Click, click, click. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Whatever was in those woods, whatever that thing was, it was behind me now. I could feel it. Not the way you feel someone watching you, but deeper. More primal. Like a predator had locked on and was waiting for me to slip. My feet hit the dirt hard, slipping in patches of wet leaves. Branches tore at my sleeves, and the cold night air clawed at my lungs. But I didn't stop. Not even when my vision started to blur at the edges. Not even when my legs burned and screamed. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not loud. Not even really joyful. It was low, hollow, and choking, like someone who had forgotten how to laugh was forcing the sound through a broken throat. And then a voice. You saw me. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. Somewhere ahead of me, just off the trail, the laughter echoed again, this time closer. Too close. I veered left, into the thicker woods, blindly trying to avoid whatever it was that had somehow gotten in front of me. How? I didn't know. I didn't care. I just had to get away. I pushed past a fallen tree and stumbled into a shallow gully, my shoes sinking into wet moss. As I scrambled out the other side, I felt the world tilt. I was getting dizzy. Tunnel vision. The panic was eating through my thoughts, making it hard to think, to move. I heard another click, this time from behind me, maybe 10 feet. I turned, and there it was. Standing half in shadow, half in moonlight. It looked like a man. Tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. Same shape as before. But now I could see the face. And it was smiling. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too still. Lips pulled tight like a puppet's, teeth too small and too perfect, as if someone had copied what a smile should be without ever understanding it. And in its hand, glinting faintly under the trees, was a box cutter. Tiny. Harmless looking. But in that moment, it might as well have been a machete. It didn't run. It just stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Like it knew I wouldn't get far. You saw me, it said again, louder this time, more certain. So now we're friends. My body finally kicked back into gear. I turned and ran, no longer caring where I was going. Just away. Farther. Deeper. But the woods weren't helping. They twisted around me like they changed when I wasn't looking. I didn't recognize the trees anymore. The trail was gone. And still, that clicking sound followed. Not fast. But steady. Patient. I don't remember how long I ran. Time stopped mattering. Direction stopped mattering. The only thing that existed was the sound of my own ragged breathing and that soft, deliberate clicking echoing through the trees behind me. Eventually, my legs gave out. I tripped over a half-buried root and tumbled down a small embankment, landing hard in a bed of wet leaves. My chest heaved like it was about to explode. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even push myself upright at first. And then, pure silence. No laughter. No voice. No click, click, click. Just the wind moving through the trees like it didn't know I was there. Like I had finally slipped out of sight. I crawled into the space beneath a fallen tree, the trunk hollowed and half-split. It smelled like damp earth and rot, but it felt like the only safe place left on earth. I curled up, trying to make myself small, trying to slow my breathing, even though every part of me was on fire with adrenaline. I wanted to believe I'd lost it. That the thing, whatever it was, had given up. That maybe it was never really real. But I couldn't convince myself. Because fear doesn't care about logic. Fear just waits. And so did I. I lay there for what must have been at least 20 minutes, maybe more. I didn't check the time. I didn't dare move. I just stared through a gap in the bark at the trees beyond, waiting for something to shift, for a shape to emerge, for that smile to return. But nothing came. The only sound now was the wind, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to get home. But the thought of stepping out, of leaving that hollow log and walking into the dark woods again, felt like volunteering to die. Still, I had to move. And when I finally did, knees numb, legs aching, hands cold and wet, I didn't walk back the way I came. I took the long way, circling wide through the woods, past the dry creek bed, through an old trail I barely remembered using as a kid. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. And I never, not once, heard the clicking again. By the time I reached the edge of my neighborhood, the sky was starting to pale. Not sunrise, not yet, but the kind of blue that leaks into the night when the dark starts to give up. The wind had died down. The trees behind me stood still, like they were pretending none of it had happened. I came out near the back end of Oak Ridge Street, about 3 blocks from my house. I must have walked in a massive loop through the forest without even realizing it. Every house I passed was dark, sleeping, peaceful, as if the world hadn't been turned upside down just an hour earlier. When I finally stepped through my front door, my legs buckled. I collapsed against the wall in the foyer, soaked, scraped up, and shaking. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, curled up on the floor, face pressed to the cold tile, my hoodie still damp with sweat and dirt. When I woke up, it was mid-morning. Sunlight poured through the windows. My dad was home, reading the paper in the kitchen like nothing was out of the ordinary. He asked why I'd slept downstairs. I told him I had a nightmare. That was easier than the truth. I never told anyone what happened. Not really. Not the full thing. What would I say? Hey Dad, I saw a thing in the woods with a fake smile and a box cutter and I think it wanted to keep me. It sounds insane. It feels insane. And yet, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I never saw it again. Never heard the clicking. Never found any footprints or signs of someone out there. But that doesn't mean it wasn't real. It just means it's waiting. Some nights, when it's quiet, too quiet, I lie awake and listen. I watch the shadows stretch across my ceiling. And every now and then, if the wind dies down just right, I swear, I hear a soft, distant click. Like it remembers me. Like it's smiling somewhere in the dark.